one of my favorite people to read on politics, on matters of culture, on just about anything, because I think he's one of the brightest guys out there today, anywhere in the media landscape. I am speaking of National Review's great Charles C.W. Cooke, who joins the program. Charles, you had a piece up on National Review this week called Kamala Harris is an Idiot.
Yeah.
And in this piece, you said that she's wildly, catastrophically out of her depth. And look, I agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more. I've been saying it for 3.5 years now that she's underqualified to be the vice president, and I still can't figure out what the fuck the vice president even does, Charles. She's certainly out of her depth running for this office. Is she the least... And I don't know. I mean, look, Donald Trump is a wild card and
right.
Sort of in a category all of his own. But is she the least intellectually rigorous major party nominee that we've seen in a very long time? Because I just think that she's faking it. And it seems to me that she's faking it. She knows she's faking it. And every day, as you alluded to in the piece, she's just trying to get through that day without committing a major error, more than exhibiting any sort of coherent overall philosophy of governance.
Yeah, so I have a habit of writing pretty blunt pieces about national figures, and this is the one that I wrote about Harris, and I wrote it because I've watched her now for weeks, and this was a conclusion that I came to, and I know people are supposed to be more polite than this and dally around it, but the conclusion is one that you just can't, after a certain point, help but state. I just think she's an idiot. And I think there's two problems here. One is that she just doesn't seem ever to have thought about anything. She doesn't have any politics. She's completely malleable. She doesn't believe in anything. And the second is that she just doesn't seem to me to be particularly bright. And you know, when people talk about how awful she is as a speaker and these word salads that she throws out and the weird cackling and the sentences that she repeats, she says in terms of after about 3 seconds of every sentence that she starts. Often the assumption or the implication is, well, she's just not a good public speaker. She's just lacking in eloquence. And there are some people for whom that's true. But I don't think it's true of her. I think she's just never thought about anything for whatever reason. I mean, for example, she went on The View, really obviously pro-Harris crowd, pro-Harris panel, set up to help her. And they asked her what is probably the seminal question for her in this election, which is, how do you differ from Joe Biden? Can you think of anything that you would do differently than Joe Biden? And she said, nothing comes to mind. How? How is that possibly the case? Then, having realized that this was a disastrous answer, because of course it got picked up immediately online, Donald Trump immediately made an ad out of it. He just showed the clip, and then at the end of it said, I'm Donald Trump and I approve this message. She went on Stephen Colbert's show. Again, totally soft interview, friendly audience. He gave her a beer at the beginning of it. He made it as clear as he could have that he was trying to help. He asks her the same question, and she hasn't got an answer still. So in the car ride from one to the other, she couldn't even come up with a simple answer. All she could say is, well, I'm not Joe Biden and I'm not Donald Trump. Well, we'd noticed that. Thank you. I find it astonishing. And I don't think it's a lack of an ability to express herself. I think she really just has never thought anything through. She doesn't have any policy. She doesn't have any ideology. She doesn't have any interesting or interested conceptions of the world, because this is just not who she is. She's never had to do it. She doesn't want to do it. And she's not going to.
Charles, I made an analogy on this show a few episodes ago. I said, you know, and I know you're a football fan, man, and I'm sorry that your Jaguars are struggling right now, but you know, there are certain quarterbacks that if you have a good team and you have a good defense, game manager guys, right? A guy he's not going to throw the ball away. He's not going to beat you, but he's not necessarily going to be the guy who beats the other team either. And if you're ahead, that quarterback can be a good quarterback for your team if you're frequently playing with a lead. But when you fall behind by a touchdown or 10 points in the fourth quarter, and you need a quarterback who's going to be scrambling around out of the pocket, looking downfield, going to make something happen, you know, that game manager may not be the guy for that. I felt like with Kamala, you know, they got the fawning media, right? All of the positive press, the media just moving in lockstep with the Democratic Party. Some might say essentially acting as an arm of the Democratic Party. The praise was so high for her. Is this a case where, as she goes and, as you said, she's not even able to navigate an interview on The View, which is like having a home game against some team that you should beat by 5 touchdowns, and she goes in there and she, you know, shoots herself in the foot with that comment. Now she's going to be talking to Bret Baier. Now she's exposing herself more and more the more she speaks leading up to this election. Does that increase the possibility that she's going to continue to lose support? Or is there only so much support that she can lose, given that Donald Trump is so polarizing? And sometimes I think that you could run virtually any American against him and it would come out around 50-50.
Yeah, I think it would. She's in your analogy, a quarterback who can't remember the playbook, I think is her problem. I mean, she's going to, at some point, be really, really, really unpopular. I think this is a matter of timing. If she continues to show herself to be an idiot before the election, then she will lose and she'll be hated. I don't think people have quite understood the extent to which she will be reviled by her own side if she loses to Donald Trump. Really, she has 2 options ahead of her. It's extraordinary how violently they diverge. On the one hand, she's the first female president in American history. She'll probably be on the money one day. On the other, she loses to Donald Trump, her political career is over, and she will be hated and blamed for losing. If she wins, which is possible, I think it's 50-50, she's going to quite quickly go back to being unpopular. And there are a number of reasons for that. If you look at her approval rating prior to her becoming the nominee, it was really terrible. It was the worst of any vice president in the history of polling. You know, at one point 2 years ago, her approval rating was 28%. I think it had ticked up to about 33. But she became the nominee because Joe Biden was clearly too old. And immediately it jumped up to 46, 47. And the reason for that is that we're a divided country. We have a lot of Democrats, we have a lot of Republicans, and our independents split broadly down the middle. So instead of the question being, do you like or trust or admire Kamala Harris? The question became, do you want the Democrat to win the election? And people start around election time answering surveys in that manner. Well, that will disappear once she's won, especially among independents who will no longer interpret that question as who do you want to win the election, but do you think the president is capable of it or is doing a good job? And maybe she wins, but she's going to inherit a lot of the problems that the Biden administration already had. So I think the combination of her obvious inability to do the job and the removal of all the imperatives around the election and the problems that will persist into a second term for Biden-Harris, in effect, are going to make her really, truly, tremendously historically unpopular. It's just a matter of when.
Charles, you have a piece up just moments ago, the vilification of Elon Musk. I'll be reading that when we get off the air here today. Elon Musk is certainly trying his best to influence this election. He's been very outspoken, clearly, and every day on X, he is banging the drum for Donald Trump and saying things like, if Kamala Harris wins, it could functionally be the end of democracy because of the importation of illegals that the Democrats want to get as voters, and that could redraw essentially the electoral map. We've only got something like 8 battleground states as it stands now. You make some of those states reliably blue, and it becomes a situation where the Republicans are going to have a hell of a time ever having another president, or at least in the foreseeable future. What do you think of Elon's jumping into this feet first, and what impact, if any, do you think that he is having on this election?
Oh, I think a number of things here. First is, if Elon Musk had come in as he has and supported Kamala Harris or Democratic proposals, or if he were vehement about the risks posed by Donald Trump, we would just not be seeing the vilification that we have. I mean, for example, about a month ago, Elon Musk's SpaceX performed the first and furthest away from the Earth spacewalk in half a century. And no one cared. It was largely ignored in the press. If he, instead of standing in that picture with Donald Trump, had been standing with Harris, I think he'd have been invited to the White House. I think he'd have been given the Presidential Medal of Freedom. I think there would have been a mass celebration of America's contribution to science. So I regard the vast majority of the anti-Elon stuff that you see as being the product of his having endorsed Donald Trump and spreading ideas that are right-coded, and some of them are nonsense, by the way. I mean, you know, he does go in for conspiracy theories as well, but I don't think anyone would care. My point in this piece is that I think that, and this may sound odd coming from me, given I write about politics, but I think that the focus on Elon Musk's politics and on Elon Musk as a political figure is a weird myopia that is born by people who have forgotten why politics exists. You know, sports exist for the sake of winning. That's the only point in them. That's why we watch them and play them. Politics exists to foster other things. Politics isn't important in and of itself. Politics is important because of what it surrounds. So we want to create a country that is prosperous and safe and fair. You know, we don't just want to win for the sake of it. And what Elon Musk is doing in his private life is far, far more interesting and far, far more important than whatever he says on Twitter. You know, he's a guy who, in the space of 20 years, has revolutionized space travel, cars, online banking, and he's trying at the moment to fuse the human brain with a computer, which would, if it works, and there's some science that it's doing quite well, allow people, for example, who are blind to see. The notion that the main thing we should care about with Elon Musk is his politics, just because he's not a Democrat. I mean, it's just astonishing. So I find it very regrettable. And the reason I wrote the piece was because I've started to see people not just say, oh, well, I don't like Elon Musk because he's said this or that, or he is supporting Trump, but that Musk is an idiot. There was a famous piece in the New Republic a few months ago saying he's not good at anything. He has no talent. He's never achieved anything. He's just a strange little man. I mean, this is really ridiculous, right? This is just absolutely preposterous. The guy is a genius. Geniuses are often extremely weird. You go back in history and you look at men who changed things, that they're often lunatics. Henry Ford was a lunatic. Howard Hughes was a lunatic. Nikola Tesla was scared of circles. Pythagoras thought that fava beans were human and possessed souls because the skin of them felt like human skin. It doesn't really matter. What matters is what they do. So I think Musk is having a small effect, but what fascinates me much more than that is the fact that he seems to be revolutionizing the entire world in a way that is really admirable.
So, Charles, give me some sense and reason. That's what I always read you for, that we have so much hyperbole on both sides. We have so much crying that the sky is falling. Democracy's going to end. If Kamala Harris wins, it's going to be the end of free speech, and it's going to be the end of the electoral college as we know it, because they're importing voters. And then we have Trump wins. There's people that think he's going to set up some sort of oligarchy or whatever, right? You've seen it all. It's out there. It's madness, a lot of it. What really are the stakes as you see it? For the average American, for myself, for my family, for just anybody, Joe Q public, What do you think is actually at stake in this election, and where would we see the biggest differences based upon who actually wins this?
Yeah, so I think that this election obviously matters because politics matters. But it's funny you ask this because my kids who are 6 and 8, I mean, they see all the ads on TV, right? We're watching NFL and every other ad in Florida is for the election. Of course, they take it literally because they're 6 and 8. And so they've asked me, like, oh, if this person wins, is it the end of the country? If that person wins, is it the end of the country? And the answer to that is no. America is a great constitution. America is largely run by people and institutions and families and small businesses and churches and so forth. It's not completely contingent on the government. So I am, as you suggested, I'm not of the view this is the end of the world, but it does matter. I think what is probably going to keep it from mattering an enormous amount is that it looks likely that the Republicans are going to win a majority in the Senate, even if the Senate majority they win is quite small, even if it's just 51 seats. And with 51 seats, that would almost guarantee that the filibuster would be kept in the Senate and that there would be no court packing or anything like that, and that any policy that either candidate, if they win, wanted to push through that would fundamentally change the way that the American government works would be stopped, because if you've got 51 Senate seats, then you can block anything that Kamala Harris wants to do as president. But also, it's not enough seats for Trump to push through an agenda, most likely. And it seems probable that the Democrats are going to win the House. So you may end up with, Trump as president, Republican Senate, Democratic House, or Democratic House, Harris as president, Republican Senate. But the chance of it being unified government in either direction, I think, is tiny. That said, there are still some things that will be pretty different depending on who wins. I mean, one of them is the border. You mentioned the border. The Biden administration has been really irresponsible with the border. This was a conscious decision. I know they keep trying to blame it on Congress. Most things are Congress's fault. This one's not. The Biden administration just decided from the beginning to reverse the executive orders that Trump had put in place, and the result was a mass influx of illegal immigrants. I don't see any sign that Kamala Harris wants to fix that. I know that Trump does. So if Trump comes in, he's going to make changes at the border that will presumably slow the rate of illegal immigration. That's a big difference. The tax reform of 2017 needs to be renewed, the individual tax rates. They expire in 2025. That really will be the first thing that the president and the Congress have to deal with. If Trump is elected with enough Republicans in Congress, they might just push through a complete renewal and say, we'll keep it as it is. I think the Democrats will be hard pressed to change much of what was done because they don't want to raise taxes on most people, but they'll probably try to raise some taxes, maybe even the corporate tax rate. There'll be a fight over that. And then there's the Supreme Court, which really is going to come down to who's president. If Trump wins and has a Republican Senate, then they'll be able to get through another originalist justice. But if Harris wins, even with a Republican Senate, then they're going to have to fight over that. These things all matter enormously. And then, of course, you've got a lot of executive power, much too much, in my view, that presidents exercise. The student loan executive order, for example, which has now been struck down over and over because it's illegal. But I think you would see more of that from a Harris than from a Trump. And then tariffs. Trump wants to put in place a lot of tariffs that I oppose because I don't think they're good for the economy. I don't think they're going to help American business. He has some latitude to do that without Congress. So these issues all matter. I mean, it's a big deal, but it's not the end of the world, in part because we have a system where power is separated, not just between the branches, but between the federal government and the states. And you're going to see probably lots of different institutions being run by different parties and different people. And it will work itself out as it always does.
All right, Charles, but before you leave here, I don't want to bury the lead. The New York Yankees are 2 wins away from the World Series.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about this right now? Pretty good?
I mean, I don't want to tempt fate and jinx it, but certainly if you had told me that they would be 2 games away from the World Series, say halfway through the season, I'd have taken that. The Yankees have been stopped since I moved to America. They've been stopped every time by the Astros. The Astros have been their nightmare team. and they've lost, ALCS after ALCS to the Astros. Well, this year the Astros went out in the wild card round, and everyone I know who's a Yankees fan just breathed a sigh of relief and said, "No, we have a shot." So apparently we do. Apparently we do. Aaron Judge seems to be coming good in the postseason. The pitching has been better than I expected. We're close. Touch wood.
Yeah, to just 54 more outs, and you'll be there. One other thing here, Roger Goodell. Obviously the NFL has been in London. The Bears getting a win over there, which I was happy about. But Roger Goodell saying that he could envision an international Super Bowl on the horizon. What are your thoughts on the Super Bowl going international at some point?
I hate that. I hate that idea. I'm absolutely fine with playing games in other countries, although I think the game they played in Brazil, the field was so poor that you wished it was back in Philadelphia. But, I've been to the games in London. It's great fun. Every American who's desperate to see some football goes. So you see every single jersey, of the 32 teams at the games. It's a fun atmosphere. That's fine. But the Super Bowl, that's the one thing Americans still all have in common, right? That's the one thing we all do together. You don't get the Beatles on Ed Sullivan anymore. No one watches the same TV shows. Not everyone is religious. You don't all go to church on a Sunday. But the Super Bowl is the American coming together moment. You can't host it somewhere else. That's sacrilege.
Correct as usual. Charles, correct as usual. Thank you so much for your time this morning. I always feel like I get a little bit smarter every time I talk to you. We appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Tom Brady, the newest owner in the NFL, he now has a piece of the Las Vegas Raiders, and the transition from player to announcer and now to owner is complete. I don't know what the next step in the evolution of Tom Brady would be, but he's certainly ambitious, ain't he? He's never going to play again, I would assume. I was pretty safe in the knowledge that Tom Brady wasn't going to play again anyway, if we're being honest, but this puts a nail in that coffin. We're not going to have to hear about Tom Brady possibly coming back. And look, the reality is, I think Tom Brady at, what is Tom Brady now? Is he 47? Approaching 47? He could still get out there and he'd be better than what? Half of the teams in the NFL's quarterback? If he wanted to come back in 2025, if he had chosen to do that, I got to believe he'd be no worse than middle of the pack starting quarterback, even as he nears 50. That's how fucking good the guy was. But Brady now, owner of the Raiders, the commitment to excellence now extends to Tom Brady. And here's his statement. We won't go through the whole thing, but he says, "I'm incredibly humbled and excited to have been unanimously approved as an owner of the Las Vegas Raiders. Throughout my NFL career, I've learned that at its core, football is a game of teamwork, resilience, blah, blah, blah." Down to the end where he just says, "I'm eager to contribute to the organization in any way I can, honoring the Raiders' rich tradition while trying to find every possible opportunity to improve our offering to fans, and most importantly, win football games. Hashtag just win, baby. Hashtag LFG. Tom Brady is a Raider," as Chris Berman might have said at one time. Let me bring in a man from Las Vegas right now, Dave Ross, who has been riding in the... You've been riding shotgun with me all week, Dave. I'm glad that you were able to shake off the back-to-back and be here today. Joel Embiid is amazed at your resiliency, Dave.
Yeah, my body's going to break down, Ricky. I don't know if I can take it doing 3 days in a row with you here this week. It's been a blast, my man. Look, what's the words from John Facenda? The autumn wind is a pirate, is a raider. Do you think Tom Brady does not seem, he seems almost like the antithesis of a Raider, right? Clean cut, like work ethic, don't take dumb penalties, all the things the Raiders have kind of historically been known for. And bam, now he's part owner of the Raiders. By the way, the hashtag LFG, I take a little bit of personal offense to that as a Met fan. I feel like that's kind of our thing. Like Tom, do your own thing. But look,
yeah,
I think we claim him, Ricky. Like, I saw Brent Musburger, I'm out here at Veasan and Brent owns Veasan and the Musburger family. And Brent said, let's hope he knows how to run a team. Like they need something out here in Las Vegas. So we're going to find out as Brady puts on the executive hat and the owner hat, how it's going to work. But I guess, Ricky, to me, why won't it work? Everything this guy touches works. Everything he's been a part of in the NFL, he's made it work, whether it was obviously in New England for 6 Super Bowls or the one in Tampa. And again, just going to 10, I still can't really wrap my head around going to 10 Super Bowls. And it wasn't that long ago that I was having intellectual discussions with people in our industry, in sports media, that were trying to tell me that if Aaron Rodgers had been coached by Bill Belichick, then their careers would have been the same. And I would have to look at them and act like that they were serious people. Like, I can't take you seriously if you actually believe that they were interchangeable parts and somehow because Rodgers can spin it as good as anybody, that somehow he'd be on the same level of what Brady's actually accomplished. A guy with 1 Super Bowl versus a guy who's won 7, a guy who's been to 1 Super Bowl versus a guy that's been to 10. So, like, I can't have those conversations with those people anymore, Ricky, because Tom Brady, mic drop, we don't need to debate who's the greatest quarterback of all time. We just saw it and lived through it for the better part of 3 decades. I think the case has been closed.
All right, I got 2 thoughts for you here. And first of all, let's look at the resume. Is Brady the greatest of all time? I got to believe, yes, he's the greatest quarterback of all time. I don't see anybody else who has a compelling argument whatsoever. The guy's been to 10 Super Bowls, as you state, won 7 of them, 5-time Super Bowl MVP, 3-time regular season MVP. He's the league's all-time passing yards leader. He's the league's all-time touchdown pass leader. And you combine John Elway and Joe Montana's career touchdown passes, and you're still 76 behind Tom Brady. Okay? Stack Elway and Montana. I'll give you Don Majkowski too, Dave Ross.
The Magic
You're
Man.
still 10 behind. I'll throw the Magic Man on top of that like cherry on the top of a cake. Okay? And you're still 10 short of Tom Brady. So that's how good he is. He's the greatest quarterback of all time. We know it's the most important position in the game by far. That makes him the greatest of all time. Lawrence Taylor, I think, is the greatest defensive player of all time. Maybe
Preach.
Lawrence Taylor maybe he's more better than the second best linebacker than Tom Brady is, the second best quarterback. But when you look at the importance of the quarterback position, I think you have to say Brady is the GOAT. Now, having said that, 2 thoughts for you, Dave. 1, Ken Stabler, my quarterback.
Yes.
Okay, the quarterback of the Raiders franchise. It's got to be, is he spinning in his grave, this pretty boy? This kale smoothie drinking? Ken Stabler was not drinking kale smoothies by the jukebox light when he was looking at the playbook. Okay? So I don't know, man. This is against the entire ethos of Ken Stabler that we have this. And then the second thing I'll say to you, Dave, is this. Look, Tom Brady, I assume the guy's good. He's good at everything, apparently, right? He's aging in reverse. He's the only guy. He looks like he's just going to morph back into his 30s again any day now. He's got it all going for himself, right? But I'm going to say this when it comes to the GOAT and ownership. I got 2 words for you, Dave. Are you ready?
Uh-oh.
Michael Jordan.
Oh, didn't work out so well.
Doesn't always work out so well, right? There's no guarantee here that he's going to be a great owner, but I got to think Las Vegas is pretty excited. What's the buzz like in Nevada? And by the way, I'm calling it Nevada, but I'm told that within the state, it's Nevada. and I would get looked at funny for saying that. So we're gonna Nevada this properly today, Dave. What is the thought there in town about Tom Brady? Does he move the needle for the franchise?
He does. And by the way, Ricky, I was guilty as charged. I said Nevada my first day here. You would have thought that I don't know what the worst crime you can do in Vegas, because pretty much anything goes. But you would have thought I committed said crime. So, Nevada. Got it. Nevada. It is absolutely Nevada out here. And for some reason, that's a big deal. Whatever. Yes, it does move the needle. Absolutely moves the needle. You're right. I mean, this Tom Brady guy, kind of a charmed life, right? Because you look at, what was it? A Hollywood movie star, first wife. Then they had some issues, I guess, before they had their first child. Got divorced, and then he, fails upwards to a Brazilian supermodel. They had a good run. Like, look, marriage isn't for everybody. I'm still single. So, then all of a sudden that doesn't work out, but they got a bunch of other kids, I think, together. And I'm sure Tom's going to do just fine out here in Las Vegas as a single man here in Nevada. And the point about Ken Stabler versus Tom Brady is so well depicted, because think of Stabler in Oakland. Like that was a Louisiana guy, but he felt like an Oakland guy, kind of grungy, a little dirty, right? Hair. He's not looking like Tom Brady. He's not doing high and tights like me, right? And then Vegas, yeah, I mean, it's got its, maybe not its best areas, but it is kind of glitzy, right? It's kind of got some shine to it. And we got new things out here like Allegiant Stadium where the Raiders play, and we're going to steal the baseball team one day. We'll probably steal a basketball team. That's what we do. We steal. So Vegas is going to steal all these organizations from pretty much Oakland and then clean them up. This is the cleaned up version of Ken Stabler, right? To the 10th degree, 10 Super Bowls. And yeah, it might not be the Oakland Raider way, but if you're really forging a new identity as the Las Vegas Raiders, who better to put on the face of that organization than the GOAT himself? So there is going to be some buzz about it, because, one of the reasons, Ricky, while we were doing our picks last week, that I really liked the Steelers last week when they were coming out here, because it was a home game for Pittsburgh. It really was. And that was not the way it was in Oakland when the Raiders played. It was. I was at the Black Hole back when the Redskins played there, and they don't take visitors kindly there. Here, come on in, pay your money. Let's go. Our stadium, your stadium. Maybe Brady will switch that a little bit and maybe start to make this feel like a real home field advantage or a real identity for the Las Vegas Raiders. Because if we're being honest, they don't have it. The identity is still stuck in California. They got to get rid of that. LA, Oakland, create a new one. If there's anybody that's good at starting new things, whether it's marriage, whether it's football, it's Tom Brady.
Aaron Judge with a big home run last night at Yankee Stadium as the Yankees have jumped out to a 2-0 lead in the American League Championship Series. Let's take a look at Aaron Judge. Yeah, let's listen in. There's something about a home run roar. It doesn't sound like any other roar in sports, Dave. And when it happens in October, it's even that much better. That right there, man, whatever baseball has changed. And there's a lot of things about modern baseball that, you grumpy old man here, get off my lawn. I don't like some things about baseball nearly as much as I used to when I was a kid. But that moment right there is timeless.
It is, and here's the weird thing for me as a Metropolitan fan, right? And by the way, let's take care of the Dodgers today and take a 2-1 lead there. Like, are those my people too? Because I'm an original New Yorker, but I'm a Mets fan. So like, can I be happy for Yankee fans in that moment that they get an Aaron Judge home run? And by the way, your producer Jared was at the game, and he said that he's got a lifelong memory now that he was at an ALCS game where Aaron Judge hit a homer to put the Yanks up 2-0. Like, he'll tell his kids about it, decades from now. And it is that, like, that's the cool part, right? That still New York baseball it does mean something more. I remember being in, I covered a Giants Redskins game in 2012. It was Robert Griffin III's rookie year. So there was all this buzz about RG3, and they had this great game against Eli Manning and the Giants. And I'm not kidding you, Ricky, as I'm leaving the stadium after all my post-game stuff is done, I wanted to listen to, the New Yorkers talk about this great football game I just witnessed. You know what they were talking about in October? They were talking about Yankee baseball, and they weren't even in the playoffs that year. They were talking about next spring already. Like Yankee baseball, and I hate them. Let me just get that on the record. I can't stand them, but I respect the hell out of them because you see that reaction and you know it means something to them. So I'm rooting for them. I will never admit that in a court of law, but on your show, I'll admit it. I'm rooting for them to get to the World Series, to play the Metropolitans again, so we get a redux of 2000, and the Mets, we get our revenge on those bastards over there in the Bronx, and finally, little brother gets its comeuppance on big brother. It is cool to see, so I'm going to give them their moment, Ricky, but I don't have to really like it as much as Yankee fans like it.
All right, well, I respect it. You want a piece of the Yankees' ass, is what you're telling me, and that's manning up right there. You're not ducking Clubber Lang like Rocky was, even though he was too stupid to know he was ducking Clubber Lang. You want a piece of Clubber Lang. All right, there you have it. Well, look, Dave, they're playing the Cleveland Guardians, and it still doesn't sound right to me. I can't wrap my mind around Cleveland Guardians. Every time I hear it, it just sounds wrong. And so yesterday on Super 70s, I posted the question, what is the worst team nickname in the Big Four professional sports leagues? So what's the worst? And we got some comments here, Dave. One that was very popular, got a ton of support. And you can see here, 327 likes just on this comment. The Utah Jazz, they should be legally forced to give the nickname to New Orleans, says Pipeline. They can be the Utah Mountains, like their logo. Nothing jazzy about Utah. Brigham Young, man, he could really play the jazz drums, I hear. Look, they held on to the name. Obviously, some names you don't need to change. Las Vegas Raiders. You can carry Raiders anywhere that you want to in the world and use that name. But Jazz is so regionally specific. It's so city specific. And Utah was like, you know what? We're going to do it. Let's see what we got here. David C., another popular answer that we had, the Commanders. Look at this, 810 likes on David C.'s comment. Commanders by far, with the Guardians a distant second. Chaz Payne says the Commanders, and JMX says it's the Pelicans, and it's not close. Commanders and Guardians suck, but not as bad as the goddamn Pelicans. So the Pelicans in the others receiving votes. Hurricanes, bring back the Whalers, says Land of the 80s, which is another one, and one that I noticed getting quite a bit of attention, and the one that I would actually vote for, Dave, is the Utah Hockey Club. We're not playing soccer, motherfucker. I am not a fan of Utah Hockey Club. Pick a nickname, man. Come on. That is borrowing from soccer, and I don't like it.
Hey, OutKick fans on YouTube, if you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe button and make your way over to OutKick.com where you can watch the full episode.